the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Tolpuddle. Thank you, all of you, for being here today on this amazing celebration of working class life and culture in honour of what the Tolpuddle martyrs did to bring about our freedoms in the future. In their memory, think of what we've achieved. The National Health Service, our strong trade unions, that sense of solidarity, that sense of internationalism and global solidarity. But also in their memory, go forward together, united and strong, to defeat this government, to defeat those that would divide our society and force a future generation of today's young people into poverty and misery, whilst the richest get the best that they can. It's up to us to act in their memory to achieve something different and something better in the future. You stand here today in memory of great people. Let's honour that memory by achieving even more in the future. Our history of our movement is a golden thread that goes back to the levellers and the diggers at the time of the English Civil War, that goes back to those that stood for justice in the desperate times that working people faced in the 18th and 19th century. Those that marched to support the Tolpuddle martyrs in the early part of the 19th century, when the ruling class wanted to ban trade unions altogether. Remember, they were transported. They were, in a sense, defeated. They probably thought they were defeated themselves, and it would be for another generation, decades later, to pick up the torch of liberty again. It wasn't to be. A national movement, great petitions, a great campaign came forward, and they were all returned. They won their case by solidarity action all over the country. And that then led to the growth of radical ideas, led to some legislative changes, led to the foundation of our forefather and foremother unions, and led to the Chartists and the Great Charter. Again, the Charter itself was not immediately successful, yet within many decades later, all of its demands, except for the annual Parliament, had been achieved. When you take action, you don't know the inspiration you're causing to the person next to you, who many years later will remember that action, remember that determination, and go forth in that great golden thread of our history, one of solidarity and support for each other. Those women who stood up for the right to vote in the early part of the 20th century, late 19th century, did so because they wanted justice, but they also did so because they remembered or had read of the work of Mary Wollstonecraft at the beginning of the century before, the work that she did, that those great thinkers did at that time, ridiculed and ignored at the time. Their pamphlets sold probably only a few hundred. But that message went through and they were inspired by it. And that is how women won the right to vote. In the same way, the great changes of the time when eventually slavery was abolished, first of all as a slave trade, later within the British Empire, and later more globally. Did it happen because well-meaning parliamentarians got together one night and said, this is a shocking business, we shouldn't really be supporting this kind of thing? Or was it because of the sacrifice, the deaths, and the determination of the slaves themselves all over the world to stand up against the oppression that they face? So remember those that went before us, that founded our party, that founded our unions, that achieved so much. And there are many other things we can celebrate. But one thing I do want to celebrate here today, as somebody that grew up in a rural community in Shropshire and remembers receiving and seeing this magazine as a young man and being very proudly given a union badge by a man that I sold newspapers to when I was 14 years old. And that was the Land Worker, which has its centenary this year. And I think the centenary issue produced by Unite, which is the successor union to the National Union of Agriculture and Allied Workers, has done a wonderful job in this. They pointed out those campaigns against tied cottages. I remember on this very platform, Joan Maynard, the late great Joan Maynard, speaking out against tied cottages and how she was demanding that the incoming Labour government of the time end tied cottages. Joan's voice, the voice of farm workers, was heard, and it was indeed ended. It's those campaigns that the Agricultural Workers Union fought, and the issues of safety on the farm, safety in farming communities, use of pesticides, herbicides and fertilizers, and the regulatory environment necessary around them are the campaigns being fought today by farm workers through Unite and all the other unions affected and demanding safety at the workplace. I'm proud to be here today with colleagues from the Labour Party, and I particularly thank Angela Rayner, our Shadow Education Secretary, for being here today. Angela made a great speech earlier, but what she's doing is saying, which I absolutely agree with her and we work together to achieve, is that the next Labour government's great legacy will be similar to the legacy of the 1945 government, which was the National Health Service. Ours will be a national education service. Education from cradle to grave. Education from cradle to grave as a right, not a commodity. The right to know, the right to knowledge. And the Labour MPs that represent the South West region, those that I think are here at the moment today, but certainly were here earlier. David Drew from Stroud. David, if you're here, thank you for what you do. Sangam Debonair from Bristol, thank you for what you do for our party. Darren Jones from Bristol North West, thank you for the representation you do. But I also say to them and say to all of you that when an election comes, I want to see, you want to see, we want to see a lot more Labour MPs all over the South West. And a number of candidates are here. I'm delighted that Jen Forbes is here from Falmouth and Truro. And together with Paul Farmer in the neighbouring constituency, we are determined to win in Cornwall, to win in that county, Britain's lowest paid and poorest county, the place that needs investment, the place that needs a council that will represent it for education, for investment, for housing, for infrastructure. We can get our message across if we go out and deliver it. Please join us in doing that. We've also got both our candidates here today from Bournemouth, Corey Drew and Dave Stokes. Now, there was a time when people used to say, Bournemouth, 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 are you serious? Yes, I am very, very serious. There is poverty, there is needs, there is a shortage of housing, there is student debt, there is so many other issues that have got to be faced in what are beautiful coastal and rural towns and cities. That poverty hidden away behind the hedges and behind the woods. That poverty is there. That poverty has to be addressed, and it requires a Labour government to invest in rural communities just as much as we will invest in urban Britain. And I'm delighted that both of our candidates for the great place of Swindon, Kate Lineker and Sarah Church, are here today. Swindon, a railway town, a car town, an industrial town, a city that needs support and help, and a city that needs a Labour government to ensure those high-quality, skilled jobs are there for the future. Tories won't do it, the Tory MPs won't do it. Only Labour can unite those communities to win and deliver for the people of those towns and this country. I'm also delighted to welcome Maria Thelfel here, who's going to win Filton and Bradley Stoke. Well done, all of you. And if I've left anybody out because I haven't known they're here, I'm sorry. But I promise you this, we travel the whole country, we leave no stone unturned. For us, for Labour, there are no no-go areas. We are everywhere. But it's also about the effect we have on future generations, how future generations are inspired. When I was over visiting the stalls earlier, Carol Coglar came over and gave me a picture, and I was quite nonplussed for a moment. I was silenced for once. I was absolutely silent. I couldn't say anything. And she told me a lovely story. When she was in school, a teacher inspired her to study, to go to college. That teacher told her, girls can achieve just as much as boys. Go and do it, go and study, go and qualify and contribute to our world. That teacher was my mother, and she brought this picture along of her. Corrie, thank you very much. Thank you so much for that and being so sweet about her. Because all our campaigning leads us to the policies we will put forward as a Labour government. I could speak here for hours on end of all the things we want to do, so much so that even on a summer's evening, darkness would descend upon us and I would still be ploughing on with what we're going to do in this area, that area, the other area. But I know you've got coaches to catch and trains to catch and places to go, so I will try and give you a summary of some of the things we want to do. First off, here we celebrate the Tolpuddle Martyrs, the foundation of trade unions, and all the unions that have contributed and supported today, Southwest TUC and so on, have all made a fantastic contribution. But our union rights have always been under attack. That's what the Tolpuddle Martyrs were attacked for. And every time as a Tory government, there's a restriction on trade union rights. It's a bit like winter follows autumn. You get a Tory government, you get an attack on trade union rights. So I just want to be very, very clear what we're going to do as a Labour government. We are going to repeal the Trade Union Act. And we as a government will follow the International Labour Organization conventions. We want them for every other country in the world. Let's make sure we have them here as well. That's what international conventions are about. And we will create a Department of Employment. We will have a specialised Department of Employment protecting and enhancing rights at work. I remember Michael Foot speaking on this very platform in 1974 when the Tories were opposing the Health, Safety and Welfare at Work Act. He spoke up here on this very platform and said, we, even in a minority, are utterly determined to get this through. And apparently what got it through was the threat to Tory MPs of losing their entire summer recess when they couldn't have any holiday going anywhere because they need to be in Parliament opposing the Health, Safety and Welfare at Work Act. And they suddenly found they weren't really opposed to the Health, Safety and Welfare at Work Act at all if it interfered with their holidays. Well, if it worked then, and we have the same needs in the future, I'll do the same. But it's also about the rights at work. We'll return sectoral collective bargaining to our negotiating tables, but we will also create a real living wage of £10 per hour for all workers, regardless of age. Regardless of their age is very important because young workers have the same needs as older workers. They need to work, they need to eat, they need to travel, they have families to support and look after. Let's end this nonsense of discrimination against young people and young workers. Give them hope, give them a chance, give them inclusion. And in this wonderful region of the Southwest, we have a fantastic tradition of radical campaigning. Tolpuddle martyrs, obviously. But think forward from that. The incredible work done by Paul Stevenson and black workers with the support of students and others in the Bristol bus boycott of 1959. They defeated racism at that time. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, the community in Bristol, for what you did at that time. I know he's not here today, but I also say a big thank you to Billy Bragg for all he's done to bring us together, the music he gives us, and that sense of radicalism that has always been there in rural Britain in all its forms. Recently, we've lost two wonderful people who've been great campaigners for us. One you'll know, the other probably won't know so well. The first one I want to mention is my great friend, the late Jeremy Hardy, who died recently. Jeremy's funeral was just down the road at Studland near Swanage, and we were here for his funeral, and he's buried there. I first met Jeremy during the miners' strike in 84, 85, young guy just starting out on his career as a comedian, a stand-up comic, and so on. But he was a comic with bite, he was a comic with principles, he was a comic who could get a message over. And it's so tragic that he was taken from us so young with cancer. But you know what? The day before he died, when he was losing his faculties quite quickly, he wrote a letter in support of a young asylum seeker from Afghanistan to help him get his right to reside in Britain. And I'm pleased to say that young man got his right to reside in Britain and came to Jeremy's memorial. The other I want to remember today is a youngish man who was born in Bournemouth. He was a wonderful filmmaker, socialist filmmaker. He made films for us, for the Labour Party and for others. And when he came to talk to me about his filmmaking, what he wanted to do, I said, what do you want to say? What are you trying to do? And he said, you know what, Jeremy? I want to give working class people their voice. His funeral is taking place now in London. His family are there. Many of his friends are there. To Simon Baker, who made so many good films, I say, Simon, thank you. You inspired others to get that voice across. Thank you for all you did. And the people here at Tolpuddle share your family's pain and grief at your passing. Austerity was and remains a political choice. A political choice made by the Tories in 2010 with the support, very willing support, of the Liberal Democrats at that time. It's hit the whole country in lots and lots of ways. Some people have done very well out of it. Some people have bought big houses. Some people have bought expensive cars. Some people have found where the world's tax havens are. But many others have suffered grievously as a result of it. Think of the youth centres that have closed, the libraries that have closed, the swimming pools that have closed or restricted opening. Think of those people that have lost their jobs in local government and others trying to double up to make sure the public get the service they deserve. Think of those in the health service struggling to keep services running when there's insufficient staff to do it. Think of those people working in the DWP and other departments trying to keep services going. Austerity has cut jobs, cut living standards, reduced hope and opportunity for young people, cut police numbers, cut fire numbers, cut so many others. And across the southwest, there are 600,000 people of working age living in poverty, according to the TUC figures, in the southwest of the fifth richest country in the world. That was the political choice they made in 2010. 1 in 4, 25% of the children in this region are also living in poverty. Real wages are still more than £20 a week lower than they were a decade ago. Workers in health and social care are £36 a week worse off than 2009. This region deserves better than that. This region deserves economic transformation, deserves investment, deserves decent wages, deserves properly funded public services. It only gets 60% of the average UK transport funding. So, yes, a Labour government would end austerity and start to invest and properly fund public services, but we'd also invest in that necessary infrastructure for the future, that necessary electrification of railways across the region, and we'll do it through public enterprise and public ownership, and railways are coming back into public ownership under a Labour government. But it will it's also about connectivity, because railways are great. I travel on them all the time, and I think train travel is the best thing possible because it's the most environmentally sustainable, efficient way of getting people and goods around. But obviously railway lines don't run everywhere. Even with reopening many of the branch lines that were so disgracefully closed under Dr. Beeching, there is still a problem over transport. There's got to be an integrated approach to transport. Buses are part of the solution for the future. And so we will be requiring local authorities and public transport operators to integrate their services together. We'll be bringing back bus services to rural Britain as well as to urban Britain. Because if you don't bring good public transport and good broadband infrastructure into rural communities, where are the jobs of the future? Where's the investment going to go? Where's the processing from agricultural products? Where's all the other jobs going to come from unless you invest in that infrastructure? That is what we're utterly determined to do. And I want to pay tribute to all those campaigns that are here today, that came on the march with us and have made their voices heard. Those campaigning against education cuts, those campaigning for decent transport, those campaigning for decent housing, and here in Dorset, a particular shout out to Dorset NHS campaign defending our National Health Service. Now, on Tuesday, I understand the Tory party is going to announce a new leader. I've got a reasonable idea who it might be. You probably have as well. But I've been following their debate, if you could call it that, with a degree of interest. They got into a sort of very interesting auction about tax write-offs and tax relief. And it went into the stratosphere of the amount of money they're going to cut off the tax bill of the richest people in this country. You're talking 10 billion, you're talking even 15 billion pounds. And then one of them was asked a question somewhere about schools. Perfectly reasonable question. Why does my school have to collect money in order to pay its staff and keep its services going? Answer, there's a Tory government that has cut the funding for your school. And suddenly, amnesia came over them both. Apparently, the last 9 years have been absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with either of them. They've had no part in it whatsoever. They've never been in a government that's made a decision to cut spending on anything. How would they possibly do such a thing? So on top of pledging tax giveaways, they suddenly announced they wanted to spend more money on public services. Well, one paper, quite a right-wing paper, said, with this kind of carry-on, it makes Jeremy Corbyn look like a cautious bank manager. Well, this cautious bank manager believes in people, believes investing in people, believes in funding education properly, and there will not be any tax giveaways to the richest in our society under a Labour government. Because if they've got 15 billion to spare, I can think of schools, hospitals, those in desperate need of care, those with disabilities, those communities that need youth services and all the rest. They need that money, not the very richest, to put it in a tax haven somewhere else. And both of them seem to imagine that somehow or other leaving the European Union with no deal is going to be some kind of help to the whole country. I've got news for them. no deal is a problem. No deal suddenly means price rises. No deal is a problem to farming. No deal is a problem to trade. No deal is a massive problem. We will oppose a no deal and demand something very, very different. Because behind all their rhetoric about no deal is something actually much more sinister. And that is the trade deals they want to make for the future. The trade deal they want is with the United States. The trade deal they want is with Donald Trump's United States. That trade deal would have a number of factors in it. One, they want access to our markets. We have regulations on food standards. We have regulations on environmental conditions. Maybe not tough enough in many areas, but we do have those regulations. They don't want any of that. They don't want any of that sort of thing, as they would call it, being a restraint on trade. And they want investor protection. So any American company coming in that after a while finds that a Labour government is there that wants to regulate to higher standards, they want that company protected against what a progressive socialist government would do. That is their agenda. And when asked specifically about the health service, they always say, well, the UK health market should be opened up to international competition. Well, the whole point of Aneurin Bevan's work in the Labour government was to establish a national health service free at the point of need for everybody. It was not a market. The whole point was, it was not how much you could pay, it was whether you needed health care or not. I simply say this, if Mr. Trump is listening this afternoon, President Trump, please understand this, our NHS is not for sale to you or anybody else. To a trade deal like that would be a betrayal of this and future generations. It's up to us to protect the gains we've made, but above all, make those gains for the future. So we do deliver an even better National Health Service, a much better system of social care, and we ensure that our manufacturing industry, jobs and trade is there and open with the European Union. The Labour Party will stop no deal in Parliament or outside Parliament if necessary and take it to a general election if that is the option. Earlier on today, there was talk about what's happened to Ilhan Omar and her fellow members of the US Congress. I was shocked and appalled by what went on at that meeting, and even more shocked and appalled by the response to Donald Trump. Others might not want to use the word, but I do. It was racism against those individuals. It's not acceptable in any form whatsoever within our society. We send our support and our solidarity to them. Racism is a cancer and an evil within our society. Once you start down the road of racism in any form, it only ever gets worse. You blame a minority for the ills of society. The Nazis did it in Germany in the 1920s by starting to blame the Jewish people for the failings of the Weimar Republic. It got worse. It got much, much worse. The nasty language became the brutality became the murder became state oppression became state imprisonment became concentration camps became the Holocaust, and 6 million died eventually as a result of that. That is where racism leads you to. Stand up against it, stop it at the very beginning, and don't tolerate it now or in any other form, at any other time, or any other place within our society. There is no place whatsoever for anti-Semitism in any form, Islamophobia in any form, racism in any form, in our movement or in our society. I am proud of the diversity of this country. I'm proud of the diversity of our movement. When you take action in the workplace to defend or improve your living standards, when you take action to try and improve your community and the lot within it, you don't ask people what their faith is. You don't look at what colour they are. You don't decide they come from this country or that country and therefore not part of it. No, you don't. You say, we are a community of people together, and we will improve together, we will strengthen together, and we will win together. It was only ever thus that it would weaken our society. Education, as I said, is so important. That's why the National Education Service is going to be part of our future. But it's also about organising communities to understand that we do not have to go down the road of impoverishing future generations of young people by charging them such huge university fees. But we also have to invest the very early years in education. In this country, discrimination on class basis is very, very rife indeed. You could almost draw a map of a baby born today, where they live, what their parents do, what the family income is, what the family housing situation is, and where they will end up. You could almost predict their chances of getting to university, almost which university, and the job and place they will get in society at the end of it. Therefore, what we do is very, very important about investing in the young for the future. That's why an incoming Labour government will reinvigorate the whole Sure Start initiative, and we will bring in 30 hours free nursery provision for all 2 to 4 year olds. Free, and also ensure that those children in primary schools all get free school meals so that they can eat properly whilst they are in school. We cannot go on with this level of underfunding and lack of investment, but it goes further. As youngsters come on to leave school and consider their futures, college, university, skills, whatever they want to do, let's treat apprenticeships and academic education with exactly the same importance. Invest in good quality apprenticeships just as much as we invest in good quality academic education. And take the stress out of what our children go through in schools, and that's why, working with the teaching unions, I announced at the NEU conference the Labour government will end SAT testing at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. On May the 1st, we had an opportunity in Parliament. It was what's called an opposition day, where we could set down the business for the day and make a proposition to Parliament. And I was very proud, on behalf of the Labour Party, to put down a motion saying the UK Parliament should declare there is a climate emergency and we will act accordingly. That was approved by Parliament because Michael Gove, don't think he likes me very much, but he couldn't really bring himself to say that he couldn't recognise there was a climate emergency. We're the first Parliament in the world to do that. Now, that's only the start of it. It's what we do thereon. But it's understanding the depths of the environmental crisis we're in. 60% of mammals, birds, fish and reptiles have become extinct or wiped out since 1970, 49 years ago. 60% of all of that's gone. We are polluting watercourses by fracking, which we will ban. Emissions, both carbon dioxide and other emissions into our atmosphere, the carbon emissions into our atmosphere and other pollutants, mean that global warming is rapidly increasing. And so we will measure ourselves and measure our government by our achievements on this. We will look at the environmental impact, not just of what we make in this country, not just of the transport we have in this country, but also the pollution caused by air travel, pollution caused by shipping, and also the carbon impact, the environmental impact of the goods we import as well. So that we will play our part and make our contribution into trying to make sure we have a sustainable world and are able to prevent the global warming going beyond 1.5 degrees C rise, because anything beyond that, we all have real problems for the future. But previous industrial revolutions have taken place. Previous industrial revolutions, based on steam, based on electricity, have often benefited the richest and resulted in a transfer of power and wealth. The struggles that took place in this valley, in this community, against machinery, for agricultural machinery being introduced in the early 19th century, were about survival in the face of an industrial revolution that was coming, that was impoverishing the already poor or forcing them to leave the land they loved in order to make their way to a slum in a big city and work in a factory. And so when we confront the environmental and climate crisis we are in at the present time, do we do it on the basis of allowing lots of money to go to the biggest and wealthiest tech companies around the world? Or do we instead say, no, what we're about is investing in people. What we're about is a green energy revolution. What we're about is green and sustainable jobs. We believe 400,000 jobs could be created by investment in green and sustainable industries all across this country, including solar, wind, wave power, all those opportunities that are there. So it is up to all of us how we do that and use the skills that we have to save the planet for the future. Technology is not the enemy of the natural world and environment. Technology properly used can sustain our resources, sustain our living standards, protect our environment and take us forward. It's up to us to change our attitudes, and I think it's up to us to ensure that we have a government in office that understands its role in this country and on the world stage. And I want a Labour government to be in office. I want a Labour government to be in office that will stand up to Trump on the Paris Climate Change Accord and say, we will not walk away from it, we will support it. But I also want us to have a Labour government in office that will be serious, very serious, about the state the world is in. 65 million people at the moment are refugees on this planet, the largest number ever in recorded history. They're not enemies. They're victims. They're victims of war. They're victims of climate change. They're victims of environmental destruction. And it's up to all of the governments of the world to do whatever they can to support them, but also to look at the causes of it. Those people that have fled from wars in Afghanistan, from Iraq and Syria, those people that have fled from wars in Yemen, where they're being bombed from Saudi Arabia by weapons that we supply. Let's think about all this for a moment. I want to lead a government whose watchword on the world stage is peace, justice, democracy and human rights. And those human rights are indivisible in every country in the world. So I say to other countries, yes, we want you to improve your human rights record, and that's why I don't want there, and I wouldn't do anything to allow or develop any kind of military conflict with Iran. I want to see a diplomatic solution to that crisis. The release of those oil tankers and respect for human rights in Iran. But let's do it as sensible human beings to prevent the slide into conflict and war through which only millions of wholly innocent people end up losing their lives. I went to the D-Day commemorations in Portsmouth and at Caen in Normandy, and I talked to some wonderful, very elderly, very brave gentlemen. And one who I was walking back into Caen with after we'd been to the ceremony, he was 95, and he clasped my hand and he said, "Jeremy, no more war. I have seen it. I don't want future generations to see it. It's that generation that works for peace. We, as our party and our movement, as long as we've existed, we've been under attack. Under attack from the rich, under attack from the powerful, under attack from some of our media. Sometimes it's intense, sometimes it's less so, but nevertheless, that attack is always there. It's designed to minimise, it's designed to destabilise, it's designed to remove confidence, and above all, it's designed to divide. And people say, well, God, it must be tough for the Labour Party, all these attacks you're getting. I say, well, what's really tough is when you're a young parent with young children and you're being evicted from your house. And what's tough is when you can't feed your children. What's tough is when you're a charge nurse in a hospital and you haven't got enough beds for the patients coming in. What's tough is when you can't give support to those people going through mental health crisis. Our party exists to help those people, support those people, and defeat those that would divide our society and divide our community and not invest in our future. We were founded on the backs of people that gave their all in desperate struggles to bring about social justice in this country in the 19th century. That's what the unions were founded to achieve. That's what the Labour Party was founded to achieve. A new Prime Minister will come in a couple of days' time. It's all right. I've heard about it. Whatever they say, we will put a very, very simple case to either we go down the road in this country of continuing austerity, continuing tax breaks for the rich, continuing underfunding of public services, saying to the young generation of today, wouldn't be too sure there's going to be a health service around for you in the future, no chance of council housing for you, no chance of education for you, you better start saving up for it. Pension, what are you talking about? Make your own private provision. Are we going to really allow the fifth richest country in the world, at a time of unprecedented global wealth, to say to the next generation, you're going to be poorer than this generation and your children are going to be poorer still? So we go into a world of ultra competition, desperate poverty and insecurity that comes from it. Or are we going to go in the other direction and say, we as a people, we as a community, we as peoples around the world can do and achieve things very, very differently? If we tax fairly and invest properly, if we provide hope where there is fear, we provide opportunity where there is none at the present time, and we develop an education service that leaves no child behind, that supports them all, and brings about some kind of decency for the future and deals with the issues that we face on the global stage. Our movement can win an election whenever it comes. I don't know what date that election's going to be. I don't know exactly what's going to pan out over the next few months. But I simply say this to you. United as a movement around the policies we have on ending austerity, on education, on health, on housing, on transport, on environment, on climate, on social justice, on rights of the individual, on human rights, the policies we have on a global stage, the policies we have to bring people together. United, this movement can defeat those Tories and can win an election. And so we demonstrate our strength, we demonstrate our utter determination in order to take that forward. But where there's bread, there must also be roses, because it's also about our expressions, our imagination, and our cultural beings. That's why we have music on our marches. That's why we've got these wonderful discussions and debates in these tents here. That is what the liberation of politics is all about. And we can often learn from those that went before us. As you know, I love reading poetry and I love reading history. So if I could conclude with this, written by a great poet, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Ode to the West Wind. He wrote this out of inspiration. He said, "Scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. Be through my lips to unawakened earth the trumpet of a prophecy, O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind?" Tolpuddle!